We are live. Let's go. What's going on, everybody? I should start like a countdown for these or something. But if you're watching the replay on this, comment down below. Hello. But we're going to be getting into stuff today. My topic for the day is I just got back from Italy. And apparently Italians have like half of the obesity rate of the US. So walking around, I noticed some themes that I thought are going to be really cool to kind of just like reflect on, like, how are the Italians so darn fit? And so it was really cool to, be in this area. Beautiful place. We checked out Rome, Venice, Florence, but it was really cool. It was definitely like an experience, definitely, different than my day-to-day in the US. Especially I don't live in like the main cities or anything. So it was cool to be in Italy. Actually in some of those more main touristy cities, Venice, Rome, Florence. But really had an amazing experience. And of course, I think if you know anyone who's been to Italy, the food was awesome. Like, the food was super cool. What's going on? We are live on Instagram as well. We got Greg in the house. What's going on, Greg? But yes, posted a couple pictures. I got my first 5K done in Italy as well. And in Italy, I did hit, it was my first 5K in like 5 years or something, or 7, 8 years. And then just broke today, 25-minute 5K. We take those. But today's topic, we're going to be diving in. And this is going to be, so we're going to dive in. The topic for today is going to be what I learned from the Italians in terms of being fit and living a fit lifestyle. So again, I was in Italy, the past week, I guess last week, for 6 days, had an amazing trip, but I saw that, people here are like on more average, pretty darn fit. It was pretty cool to see. And I'm like, what is it that sets, Italians apart? And I think that if you've traveled, here and there, in Europe, you tend to see, different lifestyles and like kind of what's going on here. Because, pasta, pizza, those are big things for, what we see when it comes to Italian food. So like, how do they start on fit? Because I hear, quote unquote, carbs are bad. So we're going to go over a couple things that like I saw, noticed, and then also like I did a little bit of research on it of like, what's the deal? So to start things off, in terms of like a little bit of my research, in terms of obesity rates, America is number 11 in terms of in males in terms of obesity rate. So we have around 42% of adult males are in that BMI over 30. Of course, I was obese like I think 2 weeks ago before I started my mini cut, but like that muscle is still counted in BMI. So I mean that can be also a confounder in the US, because I feel like we may have more of a lifting culture. So lean body mass is in the BMI equation. So, it's not perfect, but it's something we got. And then in Italy, the obesity rate is like 18% in adult males. So less than half. So I thought that was very interesting. And so we can also say, in part that's going to be due to, maybe the lifting culture isn't as big in Italy. So lean body mass, it's a contributor in terms of body weight. That's one thing. But there's 5 things that I'm going to go over that I found very interesting when I was, doing a little bit of research and just reflecting on this. And then also, what are the things we can take from the Italian culture that we can implement in our own lives to, be as fit as possible? So let me share my screen. We're going to go over what I learned from the Italians about staying fit. So number 1, we're going to go into my first one is going to be higher carbs, but less fat, seemingly. So what I saw while in Italy is that, they tended to, what I thought is they tend to consume more carbs. Well, actually, we can probably just say that. And again, the comparison I'm going to say is like general American diet. And so they eat more carbs on average. They have pasta, pizza. When I went out to restaurants, those are a lot of the standard. You get bread before your meals. It's like carbs, carbs, carbs. Also, interesting enough, Japan probably is the highest per calorie of the diet in terms of those calories being from carbs. And they tend to have, I think they have like a 4% obesity rate as far as I last checked, but that was like 5 years ago. So I'm not sure anymore. I got to fact check myself. But is carbs the problem? And seeing by this information, we can't just blame carbs. It can't just be carbs if these countries with higher, more carb-rich diets are having lower obesity rates. So what can we learn here? So Japan's my first example of like, okay, so it's not just Italy that has, the secret, was it the fountain of youth or the fountain of shreds? and they can eat all the pasta they want. But like Japan as well is going to be in this category. And so what I saw when we went out to eat is like, it's a lot of pasta and sauces, a variety of sauces. And then also it's a lot of times you always have the option for like a thin pizza. And the way they did things is like, there's like, I think it said like, I'm going to get some of these things wrong, but it was like meal 1 and meal 2. And that's how they separated some of their menus. It seemed like the meal 2 options often maybe had like a meat component, a little bit heavier. And that, that first meal component was more of like, okay, it's just plain pasta and some sauce. So it really depends, of course, what you order. And so one thing that I found interesting is like, generally if you're just getting the pasta and red sauce, like it's not too calorie dense. It's just, carbs is going to be like, it's dough. And then you're going to have, carbs as sauce. There's also a fair amount of olive oil that we would see over there as well. And interesting enough here is when it comes to also the thin pizzas is I can even show you a photo, like the amount of calorie density in an American pizza, we just have a lot more cheese and the dough we use is much thicker. When you have like a pizza that is in actual Italy, it tends to be thinner and tends to be lighter. So here are 2 pizzas that I ate myself in Italy. So, wow, that's not really coming out good. Well, we tried, but as you can see, there's not that much cheese. There's a large like crust area, and it was very light and kind of bubbly. And so macros are all done in terms of grams, which is a weight component. So if a food is actually light by weight, it tends to be less in total calorie density, which I find very interesting as well. And so when it comes down to this, like if you have less bread thickness, less cheese, because the cheese is the most calorie dense piece because it's high in fat, and like that, I think is reducing, overall calorie density. In the pastas, it tends to be, more of the sauces tended to be, I guess, like a plain tomato sauce. You pay extra to get burrata on it, which is just another word for like mozzarella cheese, apparently. I Googled it. That's what Google said. I think burrata is like a fancy mozzarella, but a delicious mozzarella. So that was interesting as well. And, as far as like your fatty sauce options, like you have carbonara, which is going to be like an adult mac and cheese, which it was delicious. However, there can be some oily food. Some of the meals that we did have they did have like a drizzle of olive oil at the end. And that was when we were in Venice, it was higher, more seafood more often. But my overall point here is kind of like what we can learn from the Italian kind of way of eating in terms of like having a lower obesity rate. One thing to take away here is it doesn't sound like carbs are the quote unquote enemy. And this will bring me to the second point, which is so counter to myself, it's just like an interesting observation. And then I'm working my way back through the logic of it. So the second thing that I saw here is going to be less meat. I'm going to make the vegetarians so happy. The vegans are probably so happy. Kevin's like, okay, they're leaner. They eat less meat. But, your boy still, I still have my chicken breast. I still have my steaks. But, like, what is it here? So what's the dealio? Is it because meat equals bad? Just like as we thought, carbs equal, quote unquote bad. But when it comes to the meat component is when we were dining out and stuff, especially like traditional, like Italian type kind of food places, I just saw like less options in terms of like meat. There was like, you don't have your cheeseburgers, you don't have a ribeye steak. You're not going to have many of those options. Because if we think to the, generally in America, like what are the readily available and most highly consumed foods that we have that are meat containing? It's hamburgers, which are high in fat content. It's not a lean burger. Ribeye, the highest fat steak because they're delicious. Also, it's tending going to be like fried chicken in the way of, chicken tenders, chicken nuggets, etc., or like, probably some kind of fried and drenched in dressing or sauce kind of, situation. Or like a sandwich that's covered in mayonnaise. So a lot of these things is I found it interesting that just generally there were less, just meat sources overall. And so does that mean meat is bad? Not necessarily. But like when we see in America, I think it's just more plentiful, readily available to consume more meat. I also find it more easy to find, grilled chicken and those kinds of things, especially if you do have, physique kind of goals, because protein is great for improving your body composition by having resources to build muscle with. So I don't think protein equals bad, but the general kind of protein consumption and go-tos in terms of meats that we see in America are going to be more highly calorie dense because they tend to be fried, less lean cuts, or as far as like a hamburger, it's it's like 30% fat. So that's like for like 20 grams of protein, it's like, I think it's like 200, 150 or 200 calories worth of fat. So it's really, really stacking that up. And then you have it on a sandwich with bread, mayonnaise, and often like bacon, also not another lean meat. So it stacks up a lot of those calories. So in Italy, when you cut out an entire kind of, macronutrient pretty much, I just found, I'm not going to say it goes to complete zero, but it was just harder for me to kind of find, those readily available like meat sources. I just think like the protein consumption on just like a general average is probably going to be lower than that of America. And then that in America tends to be, if you're not tracking your food, or you just like me growing up when I didn't know much about nutrition, I just thought a hamburger or a meatball, all of them are proteins. A sausage, it's a protein, but they tend to have high amounts of fat, and it's going to stack up the calories. So that was something I noticed as well, which is pretty interesting. And one time I did pay to have grilled chicken on a salad. They did me dirty at one restaurant, but like we went to a higher, more expensive restaurant, and I think it was like a $25 Caesar salad. One Caesar dressing is not as the Caesar dressing we have in America. It was yellow. I think I have a picture of this darn salad. And then I think I got like paid extra to have chicken on it. And like, again, like the photos aren't really working on here, but you can barely see what that is, but it looks like kind of like honey mustard, but like the dressing didn't have much taste. And that was like a $25 salad. And that's probably like 2 ounces of chicken on there. Like it wasn't much, even when you do have something that is even having a lean protein on it. So interesting thing there that I just think protein does contain calories, be that for what it is, but less meat consumption overall. Florence, though, did have the steaks. They had the filet, delicious out there. But that being said, just not a lot of, sausages, hot dogs, hamburgers, kind of that stuff. So it tends to be higher in calories, but like has a protein, source. So that was something interesting that I did see. And we're going to go into number 3. And I think number 5 is one of the biggest ones. And I think it's going to be one of the most useful. So kind of, and I'll reverse engineer some recommendations coming out of, what my experiences were. And number 3 is activity. So let's look at activity level in Italy versus like the US. Do they have a higher activity level? And let's point out my bias. I was in Rome, Venice, and Florence. These all are pretty much cities. That means people tend to be in cities. They tend to walk around a lot, get place to place, because it's just hard to get, a taxi or something, place to place. But I generally did see a lot of walking around the ruins, but like that's often like just the tourists that are visiting. So can't say that's necessarily Italian culture. But overall, so I was confused, or I was curious. So I Googled this. I was like, what is the general step count of someone in Italy versus someone in the US? And interesting results on that. So in Italy, Italians tend to average 5,300 steps per day, versus in America, apparently we average 3,000 to 4,000 steps per day. And so that the difference in calorie burn, it's about a difference of like, let's say 2,000 steps per day. That's only 100 calories burned difference. So it's an only, but also, I mean, that still adds up over time. Like, I mean, I don't like when people tally up like a whole, like if you ate 10 calories less per day in a year, you ate what, 10 calories less. Yeah. That's a whole pound of fat that you would lose in a year. It's like, no, it doesn't really work like that. But in the way of this, like in a month, like, yeah, in 5 weeks, you'd lose an additional pound by that same logic, because you burn 3,500 calories, you burn extra 100 calories per day, 5 weeks, 35 days, 3,500 calories. That's a pound. But I don't think it works out like that, but that's just interesting. So they're a little bit more active, but actually relatively, it's almost like a 2x or a 1.5x increase. So actually it could be, depending how you think about it. I was also, again, I talked about, I was in heavily touristy areas, but also I did check out for the gyms. I didn't go training because I have a pretty beat up elbow. So I took the time to actually take a week off of actual training, did some jogs, did some running. But I didn't pick up on a major like gym culture over there that I did see. Just, kind of seen there. I haven't seen on the bodybuilding scene, correct me if I'm wrong, I would love to see them, but like major Italians in the IFBB or any competitive, physique sport. And when I was in Rome too, just finding the gyms, most would open, I think it was like 10 a.m. on the weekends. And I think there were later openings on the weekdays as well. So for me, and just like, it didn't really make sense for me to, hey family, I'm gonna go train at 10 a.m. So you guys gotta, hold off your day until I'm finished getting a juicy pump. So I just like kind of, all right, I got an injury. Let me just like take the week off. But I didn't pick up on too much of that. But what can we reverse engineer from that? Is 2,000 calories, step difference that robust? I think it's useful to have that extra 2,000 steps. That's another 100 calories per day. And, for others, that could be pretty impactful. And then also in other ways, it's not that impactful, but that is kind of what I saw in that activity difference. And also, again, like if you go travel somewhere and, people are walking around because there's all these cool things to see, remember, you're probably in the touristy areas. There's that incentive. Like you got to really evaluate what is the standard day for, a certain area, certain population, for really evaluating, cultures and traditions in terms of like, what can we learn from that? Now, next up, we're going to go to point number 4. This plays into number 2, how like they kind of we have far less protein intake. So just generally leads to less calorie consumption. Number 4 is similar. So from my experience, it looked like they tend to have light breakfasts in Italy. It tended to look like light breakfast was what was going down. Like for me, I was trying to find places where me and my group, it was my wife, her parents, me, my parents, and I was trying to find somewhere like, hey, can we go sit down, have like a nice little breakfast, and then get our day going? But it was more rare to find those from my experience. I mean, there were places that had crepes. If you find them, avocado toast, it's out there. Little omelets, but I feel like it was rarer to find those. I had to go on Yelp and find those spots. We found some. We had an incredible breakfast spot in Venice. And I need to get on Yelp and review all these places, but that place too, it was lox and like avocado toast. But I feel like we had to go out of our way to find that. I think the general, and our last day in Venice, we just like went to like where we saw most people going to. It was like a coffee bakery type place. You go in there and we're like, can we have some cappuccinos to go? And then also, that pastry over there looks pretty good. And so like a pastry and a cappuccino, it sounds like, whoa, you're having a pastry in the morning. But like if you had one donut and like a cappuccino, and like donuts are highly calorie dense because they're also drenched in fat because they're fried. Like, let's say that's 300 calories. Cappuccino, let's say that's like 60 calories. Is 360 calories going to break the bank? And it looked like to me is like people would be pretty light on the breakfast. Maybe they just go with the cappuccino. They're on the go. I don't know if like breakfast was just like not a big thing. In America, me and my sisters, we meet up at IHOP every quarter. And like, I'm getting some pancakes. Syrup is like super dense in calories. Give me the omelet. Give me the cheese with that. Throw the bacon on there. I want some biscuits. Give me the hash browns. You know what? Scratch the home fries or hash browns. Let's trade it for French fries. So like you can see here, like there are options for getting those highly dense breakfasts here. And I think that just like if I were to say like one meal, and when I travel, here's a rule I use for anyone traveling that wants success with keeping weight off or losing body fat. Got a tip for you. What I like to use is 2, not 3. So what this means is typically we have 3 big meals, and you're usually pretty busy when you're traveling. So what I even did, I knew that we had 2 good places where you're going to eat later. I was like, all right, let me just have a cappuccino for breakfast. And now I just have like 2 meals. I'm a larger person. I may have jogged that day, and I know we're getting a lot of steps. These 2 meals is like all my calorie consumption is going to be. So it's going to be harder for me to reach a surplus. Maybe you have 2 moderate days or meals, and then you ball out on the 3rd meal. But 2, not 3 just means don't ball out on all 3 meals and with a dessert. So like don't have high calorie density in like all 3 meals. That's how you're going to come back and be like, darn, how did I gain 5 pounds? It does happen. There's delicious food that we don't always have access to when we take vacations. However, that being said, 2, not 3 usually works very well for me. Keep that first breakfast light, or if you have a really indulgent breakfast, then probably fast through lunch, have something very light, and then dinner, spend more of those calories. That is something I've seen work well for me, for our clients in HFP. And that's kind of like what I use. And that's what I went there. I took a week off of training. I did some jogging and I came back the same weight, 228. So take that for what it's worth. But again, rare to find big omelets, toast, pancakes, syrups. Often it was like small omelets if we could find that, or just quick pastries and like coffee. Also, it's pretty hard to get like American coffee. So my parents are huge coffee drinkers. So like they were like, when they asked for a coffee, they got the little thing of espresso. Like that was definitely like a culture shock as well. But yeah, you ask for Americano, which is espresso. I think they just water it down. But interesting stuff. So we're going to go into number 5, which is going to be probably my favorite one. Let me screen share you. So this is my biggest tip. And this is something I think we can really learn from and use in America. So number 5 is going to be small spoons. Small spoons. And then this also goes into portion sizes. And so this one, I think really, it really knocks it home. And I think that this is probably the big piece here. And what I want to start by is like, I wanted to say that gelato is different than American ice cream. Like, oh, it's because I even see places say like, oh, it's less calorie density, et cetera. It's more aired, it's more fluffy. And that may be true. But when I looked at it online for like 420 grams of like Ben and Jerry's ice cream, it's like 1,200 calories. And the same like 420 grams of like plain vanilla gelato, I think it was like just around 800 calories. Yes, that's robust savings, but I was also looking at like Ben and Jerry's, which is probably the most dense ice cream I can find. Yes, you could say that like who's stopping short of eating the entire pint, but you know, in Italy too, getting gelato, like there's still some calories to that. So kind of like reverse engineering that, like I thought that would have a greater difference, but what I think is even more interesting, because I had 10 gelato stops in 5 days. That was one of my missions going there. I just said how like I do the 2, not 3, but also like we were hitting 20,000 steps per day. I was trying to get some jogs in, but also like I was kind of manageable on my meals. But that all being said, 10 gelato stops in 5 days. Try to beat that. Anybody, bring it on. But all that to say, small spoons. The small spoons, the gelato spoon you get, I don't have one with me, but they were very small. It's like this little tiny shovel. And then like in America, we got these big spoons. And this is if you're a bodybuilder, you may have used this strategy, but I use baby spoons, not literal baby spoons, but the spoons I use when I'm eating, I use the small ones. I don't use the soup spoons. I get the smallest spoon I can find because it's going to make it makes it last longer, whatever you're eating. And it's just like, yeah, it takes more time. And that tends to be helpful because there is a time delay from when we are actually full, and then for our mind to, you know, realize that satiety, realize that we're actually full. So kind of when you slow yourself down eating, that's useful. So I think with gelato, we have those small spoons. They also, I think the bowls they serve them in are smaller than what you would maybe get in America. So that's interesting. And then maybe there could be something to the gelato calorie density. Like I'm talking grams in terms of weight, but if it's airy and fluffy, it may take up more volume rather than, you know, maybe actual ice cream from America, Ben and Jerry's, Hejnasty. Those tend to be pretty, you know, more compact, more dense in fat content. But also on that, I reviewed the footage on this, and because I also added in portion sizes, and I think Italians are the OG flexible dieters. I think they get in the good stuff. They get in some gelato, they get in some pasta, they get in some pizza, but it's all, I think, portion moderated. So let me show you guys what a serving of pasta looked like. And you can see my fork is kind of hidden in there, but this was, I think this was cacio e pepe. So that means like cheese and pepper. And then also, this was probably one of the best pastas we had. This was kind of like a basic kind of, I think that's burrata on top. And that looks so good. I can see that. That looks so good. Yeah, that was awesome. But like, it's these big bowls, but then it's like this little bowl within the big bowl. And like, that was your serving. I think in America, you're often going to get for a pasta dish 2x that. And like, you know, Cheesecake Factory. Yeah, me and Nicole go to Cheesecake Factory and usually get like a bigger portion size than that. But overall, I would say portion size, I think they kind of moderated that for the most part. So if there are some things we can take away here, let's reverse engineer kind of, you know, what are the takeaways from this? Like, what are the actual things that I learned that you guys can maybe implement to stay fitter longer? Because that's what it's all about. We want to be, you know, fit and jacked. That's the game plan. So when it comes to what I learned from the Italians about staying fit, because they have, you know, less than 50% of the obesity rate of the US. Number one is they tend to have higher carbs, but it appears they may have less fat, but also less protein. So what this means is carbs are not the entire enemy. Portioning out, moderation, and of course, calorie management matters. It's not just the carbs. Otherwise, Japan and Italy wouldn't be relatively lean on average. Number two is they eat less meat. What are we going to take from this? I would probably say they eat less fatty meats. So I'd say, how can we utilize this here? I wouldn't say avoid all meats, avoid all protein, etc. for ethical reasons, if that's what you want to do your thing. If you want to abstain. But as far as what are the most common meat sources eaten? Let's say like hamburgers, meatballs, sausage, etc. Fried like meats. So I would say that if you keep it to chicken breast, London broil, pork tenderloin, the leaner cuts of meat, you're going to be able to get your protein in and keep your calories managed. Because again, calories are what matters here. Activity level, they beat us by around 2,000 steps per day. I don't think that that's like the major one thing, but getting your steps up a little bit is going to be helpful. While I was there, we got 20,000 steps, but I'm a tourist. I was a tourist. I was walking around checking out sites. So you can't really count that necessarily. Number 4, light breakfast. I think that the takeaway from this is when you're doing your 3 meals, have one be lighter than the other 2. Like you don't have to ball out every meal because 3 times 1,000 is 3,000. If you have meals 1 and 2 are light at 500 calories, meal 3 is more higher. It's 1,000 calories. You already just reduced, 1,000 calories intake. So I think there's something to, having, a lighter meal of maybe your 3 meals. Number 5 is going to be small spoons. So portion sizes. And the cool thing was, you can have your pizza, you can have your pasta, but the portion matters. Portion size matters. Like a Pizza Hut deep dish slice of pizza, it's going to be different than, the pizza slices that I had in Italy. Super thin, super light. And so it's not going to be having too many calories. And then also, if you are dieting, you want to get the most out of your food, most satiety, most time, smaller spoons. Get the baby spoons. And that's going to do it. So those are the 5 takeaways I have from exploring Italy. Hey, Italians, I will be back. I loved it out there. I am part Italian, so it was cool to be in the motherland. But ultimately, I think that those are 5 takeaways from learning from the Italians, the Italian culture, and how that I am hypothesizing they stay fit over the long term. So let's going to close this out for that part. Let's get into some Q&A. Whew. All right. So what's going on, Greg? Good to see you. It was a great trip. I think I posted like one main photo, and that was me next to the gelato spot. And I think I showed a lot of food. So food was great. Hey, Kev, I will have better results if I mix creatine with the protein. No. So creatine, So protein just matters that you get in your protein target within the 24 hours. So that's priority number 1 as far as protein's concerned. And then ideally, you spread that into 3 to 5 protein feedings. So you want to, spread that into your overall. If you have 150 grams of protein is your target, having 3 to 5 meals of 30 to 50 grams of protein, you're going to be solid. Creatine with protein, they don't do any magic working together. Creatine, actually, the saturation you build up to when it's actually going to be effective, that takes weeks to do. So it doesn't matter if you have creatine with your pre-workout or your bedtime vitamins. Whatever that has with your Cialis, it doesn't really matter when you have your creatine. All that matters is you get it in during the day. So at some point during your 24 hours, you get in your protein or you get in your creatine. And if you skip a day, it's not the worst thing either because it takes, again, weeks to hit that saturation. So 1 day or 2 days missing isn't going to desaturate the muscles. Just getting that 5 grams per day every day. Probably not, but thank you, Nathaniel. Greg, my sister and brother-in-law went to Italy in early April and walked 25K steps per day. So I'd guess that might make a difference too. Haircut on point, by the way. I got this haircut like an hour ago, so I appreciate that. But really funny. So I think they outstepped me. So that makes me very sad because I think that I capped out my highest day was 26K, 23, 2018. Yeah, so I mean, I'd average around 20, so they got me beat. So next time I'm in Italy, I'm going 25. But we also got to take it into account is we were the tourists. So if somebody came to New York City for the first time, let's say that they came from, let's say like, Italy coming over here. They're like, wow, these Italians walk so much because I have 20,000 steps going through New York City. There's a lot of stuff to see, walking around the city, kind of going landmark to landmark, kind of as I was through Rome, Venice, etc. Like we're trying to immerse ourselves and walk around. And I was actually trying to get my steps up. So I would say that that's something where it's like it's kind of hard to compare, the tourists versus like the people living there. Not an Italy question, but is vitamin D3 always fat soluble? Yes. I take D3 drops. Would those also be fat soluble, or is it just the pills? Take D3 drops. Yeah, so D3 drops are probably going to be, because A, D, E, K are fat soluble vitamins. That means that they can build up a toxicity if you have too much of them. Water soluble vitamins, B vitamins, etc. Those tend to actually, if you have too much of them, they clear out in your urine. So like they're water soluble. A, D, E, and K, those, if you have too many, they stick around longer because they are fat soluble. So D3 drops is probably like an oil or something. I would assume those drops are kind of suspended in oil or something. And so that's my assumption. I would have to look into it, but I believe, knowing that D is a fat soluble vitamin, I would assume those drops are already, oil. But not positive if they have a different, formula or something. Can you build muscle while getting lean at the same time? If so, what is the best way? Great question. We're going to walk through this. And I think I put this either in a caption that I just created, or something I just put together, but great question. Always a good question. I think it's actually the post that's going up later today. So gaining muscle while getting lean at the same time. So let's talk first about what are the things that, so can you do it? Yes, absolutely you can. What makes it less likely? So less likely for that to happen. If you are shredded, if you are like less than 10% body fat, it's just going to be hard for you to gain muscle while you're losing fat, just because your fat stores are so low that it's going to be, it's harder, just because your body's less giving of fat because it's such a minimal resource at that time. So you're more at risk for like losing muscle, or just not being, there's not a lot of incentive for your body to be gaining muscle then. If you are shredded, so also if you have a ton of training years and or muscle built, the next pound of muscle that you build is always the hardest pound of muscle that you have ever built. So if you have a ton of training years and you've already built a lot of muscle, that next pound of muscle is going to be harder. So for me, it's less likely for me to, gain muscle while I'm dieting, because I've been training 15 years and I've built a good amount of muscle. However, that being said, I'm not shredded right now. So I'm dieting from like 230-ish down to like 215. I can probably still get stronger along the process because I'm not getting shredded. I'm not getting sub 10% body fat. And then this always brings me to, one piece is whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. And that's something that's very important to say here, because a lot of people go in, like, they're dieting and they're like, oh, I'm going to get so weak because I'm eating 200 calories less. It's like, dude, it's a Pop-Tart less. Like, relax, go work hard, and you're likely not going to be losing muscle or tangible strength. If you are getting 5% body fat, if you're getting contest lean, that's a different story we're talking about. But if you're going from like 30% body fat to 25% body fat, it's pretty unlikely that your body's going to be like, oh, we got to give away all this muscle. Like, no, the plentiful storage right there is fat to give up in that deficit. So you're going to be solid there. But if you're like me, like 15 years deep into training, I still will go in with the mindset that I can build muscle. I can get stronger right now. And I'm going to fight like that is possible, because if you show up to the gym like, oh, I'm going to lose strength, I'm going to be so weak. Like, yeah, you are. But if you go in there with like, the stubborn mindset, like, oh, I lost 3 pounds, like I can still get stronger, I can push myself, like let me beat last week. Worst thing that happens is you retain your strength, because retaining strength is retaining muscle. So this is actually the caption I wrote up today. It's going up at 3. But yeah, if you retain your strength, you retain your muscle. If you get stronger, you're gaining muscle over time. But also in terms of the less likelies, crap sleep, crap protein intake, and aggressive rate of loss. So let's say like you're getting like 3+ pounds per week rate of loss. Like then you're probably dieting pretty aggressively. And if you're 40% body fat, that may not be an issue. You can still probably get stronger. But like if you're someone like me, if I'm losing 3 pounds per week, yeah, that's probably not going to be optimal for that. But as far as, just take the flip side. So more likely, is if you are newer to training, not shredded, so pretty much anything over, I'd say like 15% body fat, or like 20% body fat, like I would go in there like you're going to make it rain PRs and make it rain PRs. And then if your sleep is good, protein's good, and you have like a 1 to 2 rate of loss, 1 to 2 pounds per week rate of loss, you're going to be in a good spot. But I would definitely say, like, I highly believe like there's a lot of placebo effects that like a lot of people aren't aware of, but like whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. So go in there with a stubborn mindset that I'm going to get stronger. I'm going to do everything in my power to get stronger. And the worst case is you're going to retain your muscle and you're just going to look super jacked because you're going to be leaner with that same amount of muscle. And we like that. We take those. So in HFP, a lot of our clients that come in, they are typically, a lot of clients that come into HFP are skinny fat. So high amount of body fat, low amount of muscle, which is the perfect way or perfect situation to have a very visual transformation. Because if you have low amounts of muscle, you can gain muscle pretty much with anything. Just get them in the gym, get them getting stronger, hit enough protein, which is probably going to be the first time that, you know, somebody has hit their actual like protein requirements to gain muscle, to optimize. And then also on that same sense is like, if we're higher in body fat, then let's get into a calorie deficit. So we often will go into a calorie deficit if someone is skinny fat to start. We lose that body fat, they gain muscle, and you look way more jacked when you have less body fat. I get way more steroid accusations when I'm lean than when I'm like right now, 230 pounds. And you would think 6'2", 230, like, oh, like, is that natural? Like, I don't know. But like when I get down to 210, which is like, okay, that's kind of normal, then visually I look a lot more muscular. I look like I have a lot more muscle just because I'm leaner. So that's the game at play. So all of this to say, the roundabout answer to your question, Wes, which is a great question. Yes, you can. The best way to do it is just get stronger in the gym. Sleep sufficiently. Yeah, because you can't control how many training years you've already had, et cetera, et cetera. So like the controllables, sleep well, get sufficient protein, and get stronger in the gym. And then worst case, you're going to retain your muscle. Essentially, can you bulk while cutting? That's not what that means. It's if you can gain muscle while cutting, because bulk tends to mean you're overall gaining mass, you're gaining net weight. Cutting tends to mean you are, you know, losing fat or losing weight. But if you're saying like, that's why we sometimes have to be, a lot of times like it's semantics, but like in this question too, like if you are saying, can I gain weight while losing body fat? It's very unrealistic. Because if you gain 10 pounds of muscle in a year, amazing. 10 pounds. And so you would have to only, if you want to get actual like leaner, so you gain 10 pounds of muscle and you lose 8 pounds of fat, you'll be up 2 pounds on the scale, but you probably won't look that much difference. So like you gained weight and you lost fat in a year. Or what you would do is just get the fat loss done. You can lose like 2 pounds per week. And let's say in like 30 weeks, you're down 60 pounds. I'm not saying that's how much you need to lose, but then like, all right, now we got all this time to get into a surplus phase and maybe we'll gain 13 pounds of muscle. But also 10 pounds of muscle is a ton of muscle to gain in a year's time. So kind of the way we go is like have one, you know, priority at the time, and you'll be solid. Great live, haircut on point 2. Thank you, Greg. When is the best time to take creatine and having sex after? Is it allowed? Take your creatine during sex. That is actually how you get the best benefits from creatine. It's going to help your muscular endurance. So you may go from 5 seconds to a 30-second session. But ultimately, creatine, just get it in sometime during the 24 hours and you're going to be solid. Is having sex after? I don't think it goes there like necessarily. I don't think it just goes creatine through the GI and like it just like goes right there and then it's all lost. No, it's gonna go into your muscles. So a portion does go down there. But ultimately, just get your creatine in 24 hours. Hey Kev, happy to hear that your trip went well. Last time you said to aim for 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, but for trying to be in a calorie deficit to lose weight, what should we prioritize? Absolutely phenomenal question. Question of the day goes to Jonathan. Jonathan, good work. But overall, what I would recommend, so this is where general recommendations and then individualized recommendations can kind of conflict. So I usually like to say like 1 gram of protein per pound body weight. If someone's more advanced and relatively lean, good place to shoot. If I weigh 210 pounds or 230 pounds, I'm shooting for like 250 grams of protein. So I'm at like 1 gram or a little bit more. For our clients in HFP, the best recommendation I would have for protein is going to be this one. And I'll write this one out. So this is coming from Alan Aragon, I think uses this one, and this is probably my favorite. And Alan Aragon really knows his stuff. And that's going to be 1 gram per pound of goal body weight. And so, but like when setting your goal body weight, I usually say like something where you're like shredded, something where you're going to be very lean. It doesn't even have to be your actual goal, but like I'm thinking like, okay, what would this person be when they're like 5 to 8% body fat? So like, let's say you are like 170 pounds at like, I don't know, 5'8". I'm just really throwing out numbers here. Then I would say like maybe we're doing a fat loss phase. Then so like 145 grams of protein would be good. Like maybe that's good, or like somewhere in that 140 to 150 gram area. Because also like, as you're saying, like there's only so many calories to go around when you're in a deficit. Absolutely. You're absolutely correct. So that's where I would say like the goal body weight is a useful one to do. Just like how 1 gram per pound of actual body weight doesn't make sense if someone's like 300 pounds at 40% body fat. It doesn't make sense to do 300 grams per day. Doesn't make sense. They're not going to be able to stick to it. They're going to have a bad time. That's a lot of chicken breast. So what's more realistic is like, I even like doing 1 gram per pound of lean body mass. So in this case, this would be like, 180 grams would be solid. I may even say, depending on like what I see for them or what the routines are like, maybe 150 to 170 is going to be like more reasonable, more feasible for them as we're adopting this lifestyle. So sometimes you got to meet people where they're at. So goal body weight or total lean body mass, I'd say that's really good for getting a more individualized thing. When I'm spewing out just like a generalized thing, like 1 gram per pound is just really easy to say. And I'd say for people that are more advanced, relatively lean, or already finished their fat loss phase, I think that's something useful. So I hope that's helpful for you, Jonathan, but a really, really good question. I'm going to head over to Instagram for now. I guess we got a few minutes. I think I may see some questions. Oh, we got a story. What's going on, Chris? When I was still in my old neighborhood, I got chased by a dog emoji, while walking, and then I knocked on a neighbor's door and ran away. I was still a kid at the time. Got to get those steps in. Know what I'm saying? Good work, Chris. Did y'all go on a gondola ride? We did not. We rode the water bus, so Venice was cool because like in Venice, there's like really not roads. It's just those waterways, and you take a water bus to get from place to place. And then like there really wasn't much driving. So I thought that was really, really interesting to me, but a really cool and a unique place to visit is Venice. I really got it. And someone may even hit me up with the history. I don't know if they like built the place on like stilts or like the water came later. I don't know, but I really got to go down on Google on that. Pause. But also we got small spoon game changer. Absolutely, Gerard. Yeah, I don't use the big spoons anymore. Unless like if I'm shoveling down like rice and like ground beef and just got to get it done, I'm using one of those soup spoons. That's just going to get the job done. What else we got? What is the hardest part for the fitness guy you face on social media? Okay, so we got a marketing company trying to onboard me as a client. So that's like half my DMs nowadays. But if you guys are interested in coaching, the best way to get in contact with me and my team is going to be to DM me and say, I am ready right now. That's a good one. Or go to my website. The link is in my bio. I think it's in my bio on YouTube, everywhere pretty much. Hejnasty.com/coaching. You can fill out an application, and then my team is going to get in touch with you and see if it's a good fit to get into HFP, which I'm super excited for. In 2 weeks, I believe, we have our next Smoky Mountains retreat that I am stoked for. What's your thoughts on intermittent fasting? I think it's a great tool, but it's not the reason we lose weight. I use a fasting approach. So like I'll have my first 2 meals. I'll eat breakfast at like 4:30 a.m. and then I'll eat a meal when I get back at 7 a.m. And then typically I won't have my next meal until sometime between, could be 11, could be 12, could be 2 p.m. So I usually have like a 4 to 7 hour fast in the middle of my day. So that's technically intermittent fasting. So it's really like whatever you do. It's just a fancy way of saying don't eat. Fasting just means don't eat. It's a fancy way to say it. And honestly, everybody fasts in between their meals anyway. So everybody's an intermittent faster. If you have 2 hours between your meals, then you are fasting for that 2 hours. But we got through those Instagram ones. It has been 45 minutes. So this is going to do us for the Flex RX. This is episode 8. We are going strong. And then I believe I will be on here again next week, 2 p.m. EST. I will see you guys then. Everyone have a fantastic week, and I will talk to y'all sometime soon. Bye.